Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it is a review of the 1959 horror film House on Haunted Hill. Now, this is one of those movies that I did not expect much going in at all. In fact, my expectations were very low. Because I gotta be honest, I'm not a big fan of 50s horror films, let alone films from this particular era. There's certain sensibilities, there are certain aspects of the film production or acting or special effects, all these other things that I just personally don't like that much. I understand why they are the way that they are because times and sensibilities and what people were looking for or the technology that was available was different back in the 50s versus the 60s or 70s or 80s or 90s or beyond, but it's still just something that I honestly have always felt. I'm not super big on this particular era of filmmaking, specifically the horror genre, because I honestly found a lot of 50s horror films that I had seen to be quite cheap, corny, too campy, just all around not my cup of tea. And I knew that this had a spooky skeleton in it in one scene, so I thought that was going to be just. It reminded me of the Screaming Skull, and I saw that, and that was awful. So it was just one of those things where I just kind of never really bothered to, or never really had the desire to watch House on Haunted Hill. But a good friend of mine, a subscriber, let's just call him Martin, he sent me this DVD a while back, so I thought this would be a good way to repay that gesture of kindness. And he's also a Patreon supporter, so I decided, hey, let's give this a watch. Let's give this a shot. And I'm really glad that I did because it really surprised me. It was a very pleasant surprise. I really enjoyed this movie. I don't have a very long list of favorite horror films from the 50s, but this is definitely on the list now. And it's something that I probably never would have really bothered giving a chance if it wasn't for Martin sending me this DVD and making me feel like, hey, might as well give it a shot. The film, to me, really is quite a charming, entertaining bit of camp, and in a good way. This is the kind of camp that works. It's not the kind of camp that's obnoxious or irritating or particularly off-putting. It's the kind of camp that's genuinely charming. And not only that, this film was surprisingly grisly in terms of, let's just say, the kind of things that were discussed for a film in the late 50s. Multiple dismemberments, people getting tossed in vats of acid, bloody red spots that show up on the ceiling and drip blood onto people. Like this kind of stuff that nowadays seems to be tame, but back in 1959, it was quite the opposite. Surprisingly grisly kind of stuff for a film from this particular era. And another thing that I definitely felt that was a huge standout with this film was the screenplay. I thought the screenplay was genuinely clever. That was a really clever script by Rob White. William Castle is the director of the film. And I thought William Castle did a good job directing it as well. I thought it was a solid job, well done. But really where this film shines is with the screenplay by Rob White in terms of all the different twists and turns, how it balances a supernatural hoax with the actual supernatural. I thought the way that the film balanced the give and take and the back and forth with that was genuinely brilliant. And speaking of brilliant, Vincent Price was pure brilliance as Frederick Loren. One of my favorite performances that I've seen by Vincent. Showcased so much range in terms of his ability as an actor, specifically his comedic talents. He has an excellent deadpan. He is hilarious in this movie. The back and forth that he has with his wife is just gold. It is absolute gold. And he's chewing the scenery at times and just really relishing the role, and you just can't help but just love every scene and every bit that he's in. Vincent Price stole the show, but was he really stealing anything? Because this was his show to begin with. The rest of the cast does well too, and I'll get to them soon enough. But let's start with the man at the helm. The man who is pulling the strings, William Castle. Now, William Castle is a name that might sound familiar to you if you're a film buff or a horror fan. He was known as the king of the gimmick. If there was a gimmick to be had, he was going to use it, and he was going to have it in his film. And this film was no exception. The gimmick that was used for House on Haunted Hill was called Emergo. And Emergo involved a skeleton that would be lit up. So it was a lit up, lighted plastic skeleton on a wire that appeared from a black box next to the screen and then swooped over the heads of the audience. The skeleton the skeleton would be pulled back into the box around the same time when Vincent Price's character pulls the skeleton back in, winds the skeleton back up. And seems like a fun gimmick and a fun idea in concept, in theory. Might have definitely surprised a few audience members, freaked them out a little bit. But it came with a serious problem because kids in the 50s weren't really that much different than kids today. And once they heard about this skeleton gimmick, they were all over it. And you had boys bringing slingshots and firing rocks at the thing, and people throwing popcorn and candy. And it was just an absolute nightmare for theater owners and for people who worked at theaters. And it just didn't work. Audiences laughed at it. It rarely scared people. It was easily considered to be, I think, one of William Castle's worst gimmicks. One of the gimmicks that he had for his films that was the least successful. But the film, nonetheless, was still not a decent hit. It was a legitimate hit. I mean, it only cost $200,000 back in 1959, and it made $1.5 million, and that's an estimate. That's a huge hit. $1.5 million in 1959, that's a lot of money. And a big part of that was the gimmick, because a lot of people like to go see William Castle films because of the gimmick, just to see what he came up with next. But also, you got Vincent Price, who was starting to become a rising star at this point in time, or already was a star, and just a fun idea of a bunch of people spending the night in a haunted house. It's a simple concept, but it's one that has been continually used and reused for decades for a reason. It's simple but effective. And William Castle lent some genuinely solid hands to the production with some, I honestly think, really good direction. I think William Castle doesn't get enough credit for being a legitimately good director. A lot of people just look at him as the gimmick guy. That's it. That's all he is. He was a gimmick guy. Some people even have compared him to Ed Wood, and I don't think that's fair. If you ask me, William Castle has way more talent than Ed Wood ever had or could ever dream of. And it's definitely on display here. I think he sets his shots up well. Uh, Particularly, I like the way that he shoots the opening of the film with all the different cars that are showing up to the mansion, and the way that he shoots other sequences in the film that are meant to be spooky or eerie or scary. I thought he did a good job shooting those sequences as well. Um, but yeah, William Castle, I've always thought that he was a decent director. One of my, I would say one of his most underrated efforts is Bug, which is one of the later films that he did before he passed away. But anyway, House on Haunted Hill is considered to be one of his best, and after seeing it, I could definitely see why. I've already talked about the script, but I might as well mention it again, by Rob White. Really clever, witty screenplay. A lot of nice twists and turns that really do throw you for a loop. And even though, for the most part, the script is really good, I don't like the ending. The ending of the film and of this story seems like Rob just ran out of time. He ran out of time and just decided to end it on a cliffhanger, or with a lot of threads hanging out, and it was just one of those endings that just wasn't very satisfying. You didn't even really know what the conclusion was. Like, are they all dead? Did anyone win the money? Did anyone survive? It's just one of those things that it definitely does seem like an instance where he ran out of time and just decided to just throw in this ending to finish it. Um, but then again, it might have just been that way too, to kind of continue this sort of fourth wall breaking thing that is prevalent within the film at times, and within the screenplay, to incorporate the audience even more into the film, and so on and so forth. But either way, whatever it was, I think the decision was either lazy or misguided. Definitely doesn't. That's the one thing about the film I really don't like, is the ending. It's one of those like, ooh, there's 9 ghosts in the house now, and they're gonna get me, and then they're gonna come after you, and then the door closes, and then the end, and then you're like, what? So yeah, I'm not really a big fan of the ending of this movie. But I am a big fan of a lot of other things about this film. The performances by not only Vincent Price, but I mean, Vincent Price is just wonderful in this as Frederick Lauren, but also Carol Ohmart as his wife, Annabelle, who is getting tired of this relationship and wants out. She has her own ulterior motives. I think she's really good too, because the chemistry, the back and forth that she has with Vincent Price is absolutely glorious. The bickering that they have with one another in one scene is just, I love it. It is just so much fun to watch. The rest of the cast is good too. Richard Long as Lance Schroeder, Alan Marshall as Dr. David Trent, Carolyn Craig as Nora Manning. She's there. Carolyn Craig, I don't even know if I want to say her performance was bad. It's one of those things where in this particular era, this was a common theme and a common instance that you would see with female leads or female characters in these horror films. They would be literal scream queens. They wouldn't have much character development. They wouldn't have much in terms of a personality. They would just be there to scream at the top of their lungs. And she does a good job doing that. But other than that, it's not really that great of a performance. But then again, I don't know if she was really given a lot to work with. So I can't even really say that she was really a problem. I mean, she played that role well. Elisha Cook Jr. as Watson. And you also have Julie Mitchum as Ruth. Leona Anderson as Miss Slides. Howard Hoffman as Jonas. Now, in particular, I liked Trying to think of the guy. Yeah. Who is it? Who's the actor? Who's the character? I'm trying. Okay, Watson. The character Watson. Watson Pritchard, played by Elisha Cook. I really liked Elisha Cook in this. And Lance Schroeder's character, Lance Schroeder, played by the actor Richard Long. He's there. Just like the Scream Queen character, he was essentially there to be the love interest and just to be the strong man for the ensemble cast, and that's really about it. So kind of a boring character, but overall, the performance is fine. I mean, the movie's not that long. It's only 75 minutes, so that's another thing that it has. Let's just say another thing that gives it an edge and makes it a genuinely good movie is that it goes by at a good pace and it doesn't really overstay its welcome. Other elements about the film that I liked, I thought the score by Richard Kane, Richard Loring, and Vaughn Dexter was creepy and spooky, and I definitely felt added some nice atmosphere and mood to the movie. The cinematography by Carl E. Guthrie I thought was genuinely good, if not great at times, especially with how some of the outside shots were done. Some of the more creepy, horrifying scenes in the film, like the one with the old caretaker lady, which I mean, it's surprising that it's not a ghost, because like, what kind of person acts that way? Even if they're from another country or they're some caretaker of the house, why the hell would they go up to somebody really slowly and grab them on the shoulder? But that's, or then turn around and be like, why would that happen? But it's still a nice swerve that the audience throw. I mean, that the screenwriters throw at the audience. A nice little curveball, so to speak. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of really well shot bits in this. The opening, uh, which ties into the editing of the film, which is genuinely excellent, by Roy V. Livingston. The opening credits of this film, or really, not really the opening credits, but the opening of the film is incredibly unique for a film from this era. It's, I can definitely see this opening really grabbing people who saw this back in the theater in 1959 and just blowing their goddamn minds. It starts with a black screen, and you hear some spooky music, that and some spooky sounds. Not really any music. I think you just hear some spooky sounds, hear a blood curdling scream, and then you see a floating head talk to you. It's just like, it's just such a weird opening, but it works, and it was so effective that it was used on Halloween records, or imitated countless times for Halloween party tapes, or CDs, or LPs. And yeah, in a lot of ways, this film has some of the first jump scares. If you think about it, I mean, there's a lot of genuine jump scares in this. I can totally see why a lot of people who saw this back in the day when it came out, talking about the film as if it was like the scariest movie they had ever seen, because there were even some moments where it made me kind of jump a little. And I'm just imagining what it would have done to audiences back in 1959. I mean, they would have been scared shitless. So, definitely an effective horror film in that regard for audiences back in the 1950s. And yeah, I probably could talk about more aspects of the plot, but I kind of don't want to give things away for those of you who haven't seen the film, especially the back and forth, the whodunit aspects of it. I don't really want to ruin that. And definitely give this a look if the idea interests you in any way. If you like old dark house, haunted house movies where people have to spend the night in a haunted house. I mean, it's a very simple concept. This rich guy invites these people to spend the night at a haunted house, and if they make it through the night, they win a certain sum of money. But if they don't get anything. And instead of it just being a straightforward, oh, there's ghosts, and they have to stay one step ahead of the ghosts, the screenplay throws in some other elements that really do create some genuine intrigue that the film manages to maintain throughout. And there were moments where I really wasn't expecting the twists that happened. They weren't really that predictable. And that's saying a lot for a film of this particular type. Other than the ending, which I'm not really a big fan of, there really aren't any other elements about the movie that didn't really work for me. Overall, I really enjoyed it. And I wish that this film got a standalone Blu-ray release from either Scream Factory or any other studio. And I don't get it, because apparently it's been in the public domain for a long time. So why does this not have a Blu-ray release only in an out-of-print box set of Vincent Price movies by Scream Factory that people are charging like hundreds of dollars for on eBay? Like, why is it only available in that form? And speaking of that, I might actually be getting my hands on that box set, because it actually showed up on a website that sells old back stock that they come in across of DVDs and Blu-rays, and one of them was Vincent Price Collection Volume 2. So I did place my order in for it, so we'll see if I'm going to get it or not. But anyway, I it's looking like I probably will, so I'm looking forward to that, because it's the only way to get it on Blu-ray. This DVD is fine, but I want this on Blu-ray because I like the film. I like it quite a bit. This might even become a new Halloween classic for me. It's the perfect kind of movie to watch around Halloween with your friends or your family, especially with your parents. I mean, it's not gory, although there are some grisly scenes that are described. There's nothing particularly gory about it. And despite the lack of gore, it still has its moments where it's genuinely creepy and gets under your skin, and some jump scares, and Vincent Price being Vincent Price is just a fun Halloween party movie. And I'm probably not the only one. I think this is a film that definitely has its fans. It definitely has a following, and I totally get it now, 100%. So I don't really know what else to say about House on a Haunted Hill, except if I were to rate it out of 5 stars, I would give House on a Haunted Hill 4.5 out of 5. Like, I really liked it that much. The only thing, if the ending was better and tied up some loose ends, it would be a 5-star film for me when it comes to this kind of campy horror film from this particular era. But anyway, thanks for watching my review, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.